Let's foray into Nevada's wild spaces. This is a half-an-hour adventure with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. This is Nevada Wild.
Here on this mountain top, I got some wild, wild life. Wow. I got some news to tell about some wild, wild life.
Welcome to Nevada Wild, brought to you by the Nevada Department of Wildlife. I'm your host, Aaron Keller, joined by co-host Bobby Jones. Special guest today, staff specialist over moose and elk, Cody McKee.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. Feels like we were just here.
Right? Mm-hmm. We sat down about 45 minutes ago, and we've been talking, and I was like, well, we might as well just record this because it's all good stuff. Great conversation to start it off. Let's talk elk to start. So you're over elk and moose, right?
Correct.
And so let's start with elk. I think there's some moose info we want to talk about, but let's start with elk. How is the elk population in Nevada looking?
Yeah, I mean, the elk population here's been doing pretty well for a number of years. I think a lot of hunters are going to be interested in knowing that we just made some pretty big changes to elk management here. Probably the biggest change that we've had in 20 years. And that's, a lot of hunters have been hyper-focused, laser-focused on numbers of elk, and we've heard over the years that people want to see more elk, and we finally created a new process to where we have a little bit more flexibility and responsiveness to managing number of elk on the landscape. That's the adaptive population objective process. And so essentially what we're doing is we're now transitioning from having this fixed ceiling number of elk within any given herd management area. And now we're being afforded the flexibility to manage those elk annually and to introduce some increases or decreases depending on conditions in the area and possible conflicts with other user groups. So this last March was the first year that we implemented that new program, and we saw some increases in certain elk herds. We saw some decreases in others, and we saw some places where elk herds are staying about the same as they did last year.
You're talking quota, or what are you talking
Number
about?
of elk.
Number of elk.
Number of elk.
Going up and down.
But that number of elk is going to then sort of snowball into the number of tags that we offer, especially for cows.
Right.
Now,
well, that's exciting news. I mean, something
it
changing
is.
After 20 years.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
It's slow change.
Okay.
And I think that's the real value of this, is that we're going to be able to be very deliberate and moderate in changes, so that we don't get to a point where we realize, oh, wow, like things have gotten a little bit ahead of us. And now we're really going to have to ramp up hunter harvest or management to bring numbers down, kind of like what people might recall from back in like 2014, 2015 when elk numbers really peaked.
Mm-hmm.
But, with that comes a little bit of growing pain too, because when elk herds increase, the primary mechanism that we have for managing numbers is through hunter harvest. So if we want to allow herds to increase under those incremental changes, then that's when people are going to see their tag numbers decrease. And then alternatively, if we're required to reduce the size of the herd, then you would see the number of tags go up. And we're seeing that this year. So there is a lot of variability in certain areas where there's substantial tag increases and other areas where there's substantial tag decreases. Now, I think it's also good to remember that the primary tool we're using is cow harvest, so those changes are really in our cow elk hunts. And I know a lot of people enjoy cow elk hunting.
Yeah, which I will be sad. I'm sad to hear that.
I'm very sorry.
I'm a cow hunter.
But it's all about those long-term gains, right? We're going to go through the short-term pain to get there, but long-term, if we're managing towards more numbers of elk, once we hit that stable threshold, that means we'll be able to offer more opportunity for hunters.
And just to make sure I've got it straight, So the old system, say a herd management was set at 500, you were always managing towards that 500 number. If you got above it, you're going back to it. If you got below it, you're trying
Correct.
to work up to it. And now it's to the point where rather than that 500 being static forever, it can be adjusted down to 450 or it could be adjusted up to 550, and then you make the changes to try and help push in that
and
direction.
it could go over those 10% increases or decreases. They could go over successive years, so it really allows us to be more responsive to what's happening in Nevada. Over the 2 decades since we last had a big change to elk management, Nevada's changed tremendously. I mean, and it's almost always in favor of elk because of their diets, the type of habitat that they like. When you burn large swaths of sagebrush steppe or remove pinyon juniper, the resulting vegetation that comes back is typically highly beneficial to elk in their diet. And so we're now afforded the ability to be more flexible in the face of a changing Nevada.
How so maybe just to go back one more step on this adaptive management, how is it grouped? Is it by hunt unit or by county or population, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's based on what we're calling established herd management areas, and those have already been identified through previous years of elk planning efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the details of those elk plans, they still apply, but when it comes to managing towards a specific number, that's where we've been given more flexibility to manage. So you have certain areas, certain herds in the state where when they're grouped together by unit, you have one unit where you're trying to keep elk numbers down because of potential conflicts. You have other areas where you want those herds to grow, and we're going to continue to apply that management philosophy to how we manage within those established elk areas. But again, instead of having this fixed value that doesn't change over time, as Bobby pointed out, now we're going to see a little bit of variability.
Right. And is that more work on you and the biologists, or is it the same amount of work?
I would say it creates a little bit of a new workflow that we're not used to yet. And anytime you bring on new change, there's an adjustment period to figure out how to work within that new system. And so for us this year, we added 2 new meetings through the elk management subcommittee to the Wildlife Commission, where they deliberated and discussed a lot of the information pertaining to the status of elk herds and the potential for conflicts and what kind of depredation concerns have existed over time in those places. The department staff helped facilitate those conversations and provide supporting material for those discussions. So, at that point, it did increase a little bit of work, but I think that we all realize the real value and benefit of this into the future. One, we're going to be providing a more transparent process for how we're managing our elk herds and what number is our target. We're providing this new venue for stakeholders, people that live in these areas where elk exist, to come to us if they're experiencing problems. And then finally, again, it comes down to being able to more adaptively manage our herds given changing environment.
In that process, has there been any bright spots that you've noticed, or anything you want to tell the people that are listening?
Bright spots
Or
with respect to the adaptive management process?
No, just with respect to like elk numbers. Or have you seen any big jumps or anything that you're...
Yeah, I mean, in adopting this new process, we had to establish a starting point of numbers. And so we had certain elk herds that at the time of adoption were either well above, or in some cases we had some that were below the existing fixed population objective. And so by adopting this, we were given a little bit more room. For instance, the 076, 077 elk herd traditionally had been managed towards about 1,200 elk. With the new process, we're now allowed to manage towards about 2,000. So you saw a substantial jump in the abundance of elk on the landscape there, and in other places we saw a bit of a decrease. But again, it sort of is allowing us to sort of take advantage of what we currently have, instead of trying to either drive down populations substantially or just completely put the brakes on hunter harvest while we let populations grow to some new ceiling that could be 40 to 50% greater than what they currently are now.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about because it's like two different, like you said, you got the hunter harvest, so you don't want to necessarily cut tags way down to where people are upset about the number of tags, but you also want the population to grow. So I could see that being a fine balance of kind of social concerns to conservation concerns.
I mean, we're definitely doing our best to weigh those various perspectives, but I think I have to be completely honest with the listeners, people that are applying for elk hunting this year, that you're probably going to notice the change in cow elk tags, and I would definitely encourage people to track down the department's tag quota recommendations for elk to figure out whether or not those areas that you really like to hunt experience the big change.
And then to take it one step further, I at least encourage people that are really interested, they want to know what our recommendations are, but the final recommendations come from the commission, and that'll be at the May 8th and 9th commission meeting coming up here in Reno. We're
Yeah,
recording
coming
a
up pretty
little
quick.
before that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, I mean, looking long ways down the road, like more elk. It's gonna be great. I'm an elk hunter. You know, I
Pro
want to
elk.
see more elk. Yeah, I'm pro elk guy.
Elk nut
You know.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's exciting for sure.
I think all of us in the room like elk, right? But at the same time, we also understand that elk and their presence on multi-use public lands can come with some other challenges, and so we're doing our best to try and find that balance between Nevada's ability to support more elk, but also managing the tolerance levels that exist for elk in those places. And I really think that we're striking a really good balance between those two factors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm laughing. There's so many ways to take it from here, but
Take it wherever you want.
We'll let you choose your fighter here. Do you want to jump into hunter satisfaction data for elk hunts, or age class? Two topics people are going to like, but I think you have interesting information to share with people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's probably pertinent just to talk about age class, because this year is the first year that we've collected incisor teeth from hunter harvested bulls since 2020, and we can use those teeth to estimate the age of bulls. We submit it to a lab in Montana. They count cementum rings on the lower incisors just like you would tree rings. And so we found some pretty interesting findings this year from hunters. In 2020, the average age of a hunter harvested bull was 5.8. And then this year, from those submitted incisor teeth, we saw that average age increase to 6.4. And I think it's important to keep in mind that in 2020, when we collected teeth, that 5.8 was the highest ever. So of all the years that we've collected teeth from hunter harvested elk, 2020 was the highest, and we just saw a jump of about half a year from hunters. And so I think that definitely is shedding some light on how we've been using main beam data to guide our harvest recommendations. I don't want to deviate from that process currently, but I think it's cause for us to kind of reflect a little bit on how we've been using main beam to craft our harvest recommendations, and whether or not we need to think about more of a hybrid approach going forward, or if we should be attempting to take teeth a little bit more frequently. But it's, I think, ultimately we don't currently have an age that we're targeting our harvest for. We're using main beam length as a surrogate for age, which there is a really strong correlation between the length of your main beam and the age of an elk. And that relationship is strong until 6.5, 7. But after 7, that's where you start to see that relationship destabilize. As an elk gets older beyond 7, that relationship can stay flat. Or what I think also happens, and is maybe driving some of the information that we're now analyzing, is you start to see a drop-off in main beam length. And so interestingly, when we plot the age of elk in Nevada over time, we saw back in 2014 that the average age of a bull was somewhere around 5 years of age. The average main beam length at that time was 44.5 inches or something around there. Now flash forward to 2025, and the average age of a harvested bull is almost 6.5 years old. Meanwhile, that average main beam is 45. So essentially, we're seeing this tremendous increase in tremendous gain in average age, but really negligible change in main beam. And so all of that to say is that while we can continue to increase the average age of a bull in our harvest, and again, we don't have a target age identified anywhere in our management plans or our hunter guidelines, but we're not going to see any change in main beam, and it might even decrease because of that relationship that I was talking about earlier, that curvilinear relationship where main beams actually decrease as the bull gets older than 7.
Is that where you would say typically a bull is going to max out? And I'm just like trying to give this context for other people, because I want to say deer is maybe 5 or 6 or typically, and I think elk might be a smidgen older, maybe 6 or 7. Just as a like big broad general statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think for deer, if you were to look at averages, which, there's always going to be outliers in data sets, no matter how you look at them. But on average, and this is supported by other heavy hitters in mule deer management world, you're looking at a 4.5 to 5 year old deer is probably your max. And I think what we're seeing with our elk herd is that 6.5 to 7 is probably where you're hitting that sweet spot with respect to like antler growth potential. But again, there's always going to be outliers. I can look through our data sets and I can find a 5-year-old bull that was probably 340, and I may find a 12-year-old bull that was like 295. So it doesn't always, these trends don't always stay consistent. But what we want to do is look at averages and look for trends in our data. And what the trends are telling us are, we can continue to be restrictive in our harvest, and we can increase the average age if that is what Nevada sportsmen want. But I cannot guarantee that you are going to notice any difference in the field with respect to the antler potential of the elk that you're looking at on your hunt.
Right. Yeah, the bulls will always get older.
They can't
but
get
they
older.
might not get bigger.
And probably not.
Right.
Which is a long way of saying really good time to draw an elk tag. An antlered elk tag.
Is it ever not a good
I
time
don't know if
to
it's ever
draw
not a
Nevada
good
elk tag?
Well, it's cool that you laid all that out there, because I don't think that's clear to everybody. That I would assume a lot of people would just think, well, older elk, that's better.
Right.
That has to be better.
You know
But
what?
There's diminishing returns at some point.
There's somebody
here.
listening to this right now that's like, no. Like, dude, you're wrong, and that's okay. But I would gladly sit down with anybody that feels strongly that this isn't the case, and we can go over our data sets to look at that. Again, outliers exist everywhere. It doesn't matter what kind of data set you're looking at. But when you talk about trends and looking at relationships, that's where you're looking at those averages. And we have a really strong data set both this year, but also going back to 2007, 2008, the first year that we started collecting.
And why don't
teeth.
So we collect teeth every 5 years?
Yep.
Ish. Why don't we collect teeth more frequent?
That might be the direction we're headed.
Okay.
So that main beam information, we adopted that about 10 years ago. Collecting teeth is resource intensive. So somebody from the department this year, Emily in the game division, really spearheaded the hunter coordination, getting envelopes out, messaging hunters and organizing teeth as they come in to like kind of help us address that need.
Mm-hmm.
But she has other things that she could be working on at the same time. And
Yeah.
so we've been using this main beam metric is our surrogate for age. And we're not wrong, but I think we've sort of gotten hyper-focused on that main beam as being sort of the end-all, be-all, the goal. And there's a particular proportion of bulls that we're targeting to have that, and maybe it's time we rethink. Maybe we need to shift that earlier. If we don't want to do teeth every year, maybe we need to think about a smaller proportion of bull elk meeting this main beam metric in order to sort of maximize the hunting potential that we can provide while minimizing any negative experiences of like, you know, a noticeable decrease in trophy quality or
Yeah.
you know, negatively impacting the productivity of an elk herd because we've taken too many bulls.
Now for the topic that has nothing to do, or almost nothing to do with trophy potential, hunter satisfaction. What is our hunter? What's the question that we ask people to gauge what hunter satisfaction is? I think this is the most underrated piece of information we give hunters to consider when they go to apply for hunts. And if I'm not the number one proponent of that, maybe Cody is.
Well, I guess it depends. Yeah, I mean, everybody that gets a tag in Nevada is answering that same question. I would ask them, you know, if you get a survey from your local grocery store or the hardware store, I mean, we all get them in the email, and somebody asks us, well, how satisfied were you with this experience? How do you answer that?
Well,
right?
Well, that's what I meant I think the question is, how satisfied were you with this hunt?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we have it answered. It's one of the questions that's in our mandatory report, or mandatory return card, or mandatory hunter survey questionnaire.
Mhm.
And I think it's cool, in my opinion, because it wraps everything into one. How satisfied were you on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest?
Sure.
And I only say it as an underrated tool because I'm never going to get to do all of these hunts, but I can use that as another gauge of like, are people having fun? Like, was this enjoyable? Was it satisfying? I think it's the everything subjective metric, but that it kind of bears out in the long run.
Yeah, it's hard. For me, it's hard to kind of wrap my head around. Have you ever given? You've had quite a few tags. Have you ever given a tag or a hunt less than 5 stars?
Yeah,
You have.
for sure.
Have you ever
Interesting.
gone below 4?
I don't know.
Right. I
I
feel like
don't
we're
know.
pretty positive when it comes to hunting, so like, I don't know. I think it would skew that way in my mind, but
Yeah. I mean, a hunter anytime you respond to those types of surveys, it's subjective. It's in the eyes of the beholder, you know, and we could implement the most robust, rigorous sampling protocol and answer all of the questions, and we may never fully be able to say definitively, hey, this is the reason that somebody responded that they were satisfied, right? But I do think it's a pretty valuable gauge, and I think it's capturing these voices that we may not always hear from when we go through our annual season setting, quota setting cycle. And so to your point, Bobby, it's an extremely valuable data set that we could probably leverage to use more often. And if we're, you know, if we want to dive into it, for instance, you know, when we're talking about people's hunts and I'm talking about main beam data and age data, I have a lot of information at my fingertips when I'm working through our quota recommendations and evaluating what our biologists have provided us. And I can look at that hunter satisfaction. I can look at whether or not somebody was successful on their hunt, how that relates to satisfaction. So not surprising to you guys and probably anybody that's listening, but if you didn't harvest, your hunter satisfaction is much lower than somebody that did. I mean, that's straightforward, right? But then once we go beyond that, okay, well, what if everybody harvested, or who harvested? How did that go? And at least for bull elk hunting, the average response, if you killed a bull on a bull elk hunt, no matter how big it was, is that you had a mostly satisfied experience. And there's very little difference between a young age class animal and a mature age class animal in satisfaction. But if you really wanted to dive into it, we saw that there is a cutoff at 44 inches. So if you harvested a bull elk that was 44 inches or greater, that you were likely to be more satisfied than somebody that harvested a bull elk that was 44 inches or less. But again, keeping in mind that on average you reported at least a 4 or higher, regardless of what the quality of the animal
You're
that
still
you
pretty
harvested was.
satisfied.
You had a good hunt.
Right.
And so that, again, kind of speaking back to main beam data and so on and so forth, it does kind of make you think about how you want to use that information to sort of drive your management into the future. And I think it definitely at least provides us with some things to ruminate on for a bit.
Yeah, and I guess I use it mainly as a relative to the other hunts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is just trying to get a gauge of one extra kind of piece. Like I'm looking for an edge or looking for a little more information. You can't do all these hunts, but if 25 hunters went on this hunt and they are pretty satisfied, I can at least think like, okay, like that is probably not going to be a bad time.
I mean, I don't know if I'm just thinking off the top of my head, there's probably very few hunts that we offer, regardless of whether it's elk, deer, pronghorn, bighorn sheep, that the average hunter satisfaction is anything less than like neutral, which is actually pretty good if you think about like the various experiences that people are having, the things that you can't predict. You got a flat tire when you're driving out there, and that kind of set the stage for a bad week. I mean, there's all kinds of factors at play, but in general, I think it speaks to the quality of experience that you're going to get when you come out to Nevada.
Which is a perfectly good selling point. In the same
We
thing
didn't
I
tell
tell
you to say
everybody.
that,
We
right?
didn't. Yeah,
I mean,
we didn't coach them.
We
No.
didn't coach you up on that. That was all you.
Also, probably not a surprise. Hunters like to go hunting.
Yeah, hunters want to hunt. And it does make sense that if you kill a bull, you're pretty happy.
I mean, I am.
Yeah.
I had a spike tag last year, and it was an amazing hunt.
Yeah, we got a guy that works for us. He hunted the whole season. He killed his bull on the 20-something day.
Archery hunt.
Bull came back at 12 years old.
It was 15.
15 years old.
Sorry.
Even better.
I had to correct you there.
Yeah.
15 years old.
Yeah, and not the biggest bull that was killed last year, right? But super satisfied, got all the juice out of the tag that he had, and good example of older bull, archery hunt, fun.
I mean, we all saw pictures of that bull, and we were probably like, oh, that's like, what, 4 or 5 year old bull maybe?
Yeah,
if you just saw a picture of it,
Yeah.
you were like, oh, that's a...
I would never have guessed 15.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
These conversations and talking to him has made me kind of rethink some things for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, and how many people are like out in the field on a hunt and they look at something and they know definitively that they're looking at an old or a young animal, and I just, I don't think that that's actually something that you can accurately assess until you have your hands on them and you're able to look at their teeth, their body condition. Like, there's a lot of factors. I mean, sure, generally older is probably going to, like, body size be bigger, but if you're just looking at antlers, it can be a bit deceiving.
It's funny because after I totally agree, because I look at body size, and you can kind of think older, But I was gonna say the funny thing is I think it made him more satisfied when he found out that it was older.
I would agree. So, because I can see what that person reported on their hunter satisfaction, and I'm assuming that it went up after he found out about that.
Yeah, which is fun to think about as well.
Yeah.
Well, the other part that's cool, and not to create, I guess thinking about like Emily and doing extra work to get the teeth, is that we can do anything, we can't do everything. We're only so many people, but
Yeah.
I think there might be even satisfaction in just knowing a little more about the animal. Or like I've always thought that
For
like
sure.
a little more of the story, you feel like, I don't know, you're a little more connected, just like knowing something like that, which is cool.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I 100% agree with you. It just, creates that deeper connection to the animal that you harvested when you look at the picture. Now you have better context of that animal. For instance, the bull that Aaron's mentioning, I mean, think of all the things that have changed in the world over 15 years that bull has now not necessarily survived it, but I mean, you're talking about COVID pandemics. I mean, I was still in graduate school when it was born as a calf back in
Well, and he outsmarted
2010,
a lot of
2011.
hunters.
Yeah.
Staying alive for 15 years.
And this person 15 years ago was in a very different place.
Right. Yep, definitely. So,
All right, don't let you go without talking about moose. We're gonna get in trouble if we don't talk about moose.
Are
yeah,
we
I
out
don't
of
know.
time?
Just give us a one-liner. Where are we at?
Man, moose are doing well. The department's recommending a slight increase to tags this year, so your draw odds just went up. And the information we're getting from the hunters in the field is really what's helping spearhead that change. But we also know that the population is growing, the age structure is shifting, and that there's the ability to accommodate a little bit more harvest this year that we hope to be able to provide going forward.
does that seem predictable to you? As far as like more, we knew we were going to get more moose. They were going to get a little older. Is it like on?
I think so. There's definitely some things that we're still learning about the population here. Some challenges with being able to really quantify these really big-bodied creatures, but are dispersed across a really great geographic area. And then also being able to accurately assess how productive they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so these, the estimates that we have, our population estimates, I think are really conservative compared to what the true number are. But we also want to make sure that we have hard data that we're comfortable with in informing our estimating process.
Yeah, I just meant, like, not to put you on the spot, but like, I've heard you talk to the commission and seen your presentations, and we've talked about this for a few years now, and it was always seemed like hope. Like,
Yeah.
you were hopeful that the population was going to get bigger and that we were going to see great reproduction, and that we know there's no natural predators to moose because they're so big.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant. Like, it looks like,
Yeah, they're checking all the boxes. And,
Yeah.
and it's really cool in that, as I had predicted 3-4 years ago, and probably not a surprise to some, but we're really starting to see a lot of population growth and expansion into the East Humboldt and Ruby Mountains. So our moose have found their way across Interstate 80. They've found the high-quality habitats in those mountain ranges, and we're starting to see proliferation of the moose herd in those places. And I think that's really cool. And just given my understanding of the mountain range and the habitat requirements for moose, there's just a lot of potential there for numbers to increase while they're in those places.
is there anything that doesn't like the Ruby Mountains? I mean, like, I think everything loves the Ruby Mountains, and it seems like that's always high production. And
What are they? They're the Alps of Nevada, right?
Yeah.
You've got this high elevation mountains that don't necessarily the systems that reside there don't really fit into the outlying mountain ranges. Higher diversity, richness.
I feel like you can't talk
Habitat
about
quality.
the rubies without smiling or like having
Only place in North America with Himalayan snowcock and moose.
I mean, I think you could say
And
that
goat-
like
mountain
Himalayan
goats.
snowcock and mountain goats, Himalayan snowcock and Rocky Bighorn.
That's the
like,
trick.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I'm glad to hear that the moose population is continuing to grow and expand. And they're
Yeah.
doing that all on their own. We haven't touched them yet.
They're doing it all on their own.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which is kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great things to be excited about in the Elk and Moose program. I'm probably one of the more fortunate individuals in the, at least in the game division staff, and that we're often working on species that are in crisis. And at least for elk, we're sort of like, hey, we got to kind of keep our tabs on these guys because we don't want them to get away from us.
Yeah, not for lack of work, right?
No,
That this stuff is booming and seems to be headed in the right direction. Definite bright spot in Nevada.
Among many.
Yeah, among many.
It's a sunny state.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'm surprised we fit all that info into one podcast. That was a lot. I thought we were going to have to split it up into part 1, part 2, but good job rattling off all that info.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. Happy to talk about the things I do.
Exciting stuff for Elk and Moose in Nevada, and yeah, should be an exciting time this application period this fall. Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. A few elk hunters are going to be happy, I think. So thank you everyone for listening. That does it for this week's Nevada Wild.
Join us again next week for our next adventure, Nevada Wild. It's a production of the Nevada Department of Wildlife.